As we've been going through the study of the book of Proverbs, we've been talking about God's wisdom for living. And so the book of Proverbs is really focused on daily practical wisdom, how God wants his people to live in their daily lives. And our survey of the Proverbs so far have gone through and looked at those very practical things. And tonight's going to be no different. So we begin our 10th lesson looking at a very practical life application, which is laziness versus hard work. Which should characterize your life, right? That's kind of an easy, right? Kind of a softball, right? And so it's really easy to answer the question, what characteristics should I have in my life? Laziness or hard work? Hard work. It's much harder to work on that. So two words we don't like are hard and work. Put those two together, we really don't like it, right? But it takes much more effort to have a very strong work ethic where you're willing to work hard. And yet the Bible teaches us that if we're going to be God's people, that ought to be a character that defines us. Now remember, the main emphasis of the book of Proverbs is how to live your life with wisdom. And the idea that wisdom is from God, that there is a way to wisely live your life, and there is a way not to live your life, which is characterized in the Proverbs by the word foolish. And if you go and you look at the amount of verses that are given to each category or to each section, you will find that this is one of the highest ones. And so this is one of the most talked about things in the book of Proverbs is laziness and hard work. And you'll see through the verses tonight that the Proverbs are not tolerant of lazy people. It's considered to be one of the apex characteristics of foolishness. And so the sting of the images that are used, the sarcasm. And so Proverbs are really down on laziness, as you would probably imagine. It is true today there are some people who are rich despite being lazy because they were born into generational wealth. I mean, that was true in the ancient world and is true today. But that is not the norm. I mean, for 99% of people, you being lazy or you having a strong work ethic is going to affect your life in an extremely negative or extremely positive way, depending on which one you're going to choose. And so that is true for all of us. The Proverbs talk about working hard. Working hard is a critical component of wisdom. Without hard work, you cannot live a life of wisdom prescribed by the Proverbs or generally throughout the rest of Scripture. And so let's go ahead and let's begin. Before we begin, some clarification. Can you think of any modern day Proverbs about working hard or laziness? Not from the book of Proverbs, but like English, American Proverbs about diligence, laziness, or working hard. Maybe that you say or your parent or grandparent said to you.
Work smarter, not harder.
Work smarter, not harder. I don't know if that exactly goes along with our embracing hard work mentality, but it's certainly to your advantage, right? To work smart and hard, right?
Make hay while the sun shines.
Okay, make hay while the sun shines, right? I've heard that a lot in my life. What does that mean, Matt?
It means when you got the opportunity, you better do it because you might not have the opportunity.
That's right. When you have the opportunity, you better do it because that opportunity may go away with the rain in this case, right? So make hay while the sun shines. What else? Anybody else have a proverb from your family or something? Austin?
I had a young man worked for me years ago. He worked about half a day. And he was good when he worked. He said, I've heard all my life, a good day's work never hurt nobody. But he's ain't about to try to see.
Yeah. If you couldn't hear Austin, he said he had a man that worked for him about half a day. And the man said that he had heard that hard work had never hurt anybody, but he wasn't about to try it and see for himself. And so.
The proverb for laziness could be early bird gets a worm.
Yeah, the early bird catches the worm, right? And the adverse of that, right, is talking about kind of the diligence and being a go-getter, where the opposite is if you're not, you're lazy, you lay in bed. And that's one of the analogies that's used over and over the Proverbs. Somebody who lays in bed, you don't get the worm, right? And so, yeah. Ms. Nita?
My grandma used to say, you can be rich, or you can be poor, but there is no excuse for dirty.
You can be rich or you can be poor, but there's no excuse for being dirty.
Because if they're your last pair of jeans, they're going to be clean.
Your last pair. My grandmother used to always say, you can fall in love with a rich one just as easily as you can a poor one. I think that was technically different than the one you just said, though. Which always amazed me that she married a poor farmer. So I guess maybe she was looking back on her life and thought maybe she should have done some things differently. Anyways.
Do as I say, no as I do.
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do. Anybody else got one about work?
Mine and Tammy's grandmother man works from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done.
Okay, all right. Don't a grenade in there. All right, Miss Jackie. All right. Yeah, if you couldn't hear, Miss Jackie said that her granny and Tammy's too used to say that a man works from sun up to sundown, but a woman's work is never done. I think I got that. I think I missed that up.
Sun to sun.
Sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done. That helps the rhyming. Okay, good. Good.
My dad always used to say, I struggled to get B's. I had to work hard to get B's.
Yeah.
And there was obviously some kids in school who, they could make A's on accident. But when Dad always said, he said, you don't have to be the smartest to work the hardest.
Yeah.
And so you can set yourself apart without being the straight A student.
That's right. Yeah. You might not be the smartest, but you can work the hardest. I was actually looking at some of the data. It was talking about this study that they had done. And they took two groups of kids, basically, and made them do a task. And in one group of kids, they praised their intelligence. You're so smart. You did such a good job. You're brilliant, stuff like that. And the other group, they praised their effort and said, you tried so hard. I really liked what you did right here when you had this problem. And they did this a couple of times. And they noticed that over a length of time, the performance in the group that got praised for their intelligence actually went down because they actually started to increase the difficulty of the problems. But the productivity of the ones that were praised for their work did better. It increased over time, whereas the ones that were praised for intelligence went down. And this was a big kind of drawn out survey. But basically, it was saying, like, if you praise somebody for their intelligence and they get to a problem that's too difficult, they think the problem is me. I can't do this because if I'm so smart and I can't do this problem, But the other group was like, if I work hard, I can figure it out. And so with the difference of instilling reliability on your own wisdom, on your own intelligence versus your own work ethic, basically, is what the survey and study did. I thought that was interesting. I thought that had relevance to this, but now that I said it, I'm not sure it does. But I think it does.
I always heard
Swapping daylight for dark. Step it up. Yeah.
How about early to bed, early to rise makes men healthy, wealthy, and wise?
That's right. Benjamin Franklin, right? Benjamin Franklin said that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's just where it came from, Benjamin Franklin. And so, yeah, good. All right. So the reason I wanted to do that because technically in our culture, I'm not really sure we are anymore, but we used to be a culture that put a high priority on work ethic. That was kind of a marker of our society, kind of in the Western world and in America in particular. This idea that your character was linked to your work ethic, and that if you didn't have a strong work ethic, that was a defect in your character. I'm afraid in our society we have lost that, which is a shame because if you look at the Bible actually is the one that reinforces that from the beginning, that your character and your work ethic are linked. If you have a strong work ethic, that's a sign of a strong character. If you have a poor work ethic, it's a sign of a poor character. Your character is not inherited. Your character is what you choose. And that's what the book of Proverbs says, that you choose your character. And a part of your character, at least one of the most defining things about your character, is your work ethic because it affects so many aspects in your life. Is being married hard? Yeah. And if you want to have a good one, you better work at it. Is raising kids hard? Boy, let me tell you, you want good kids? You better work at it. Is working every day hard? Yeah. So, this characteristic is so important because it affects so many phases of your life, right? And so the Proverbs really nails down this idea of laziness versus hard work. So let's get into the text and see what some of these verses tell us. First, we're going to look at is in Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 11. This starts off with an illustration, right? And many of us are very familiar with this. At least when we start reading it, you probably will be. Where the sage, the wise man, tells his son to go and to watch the ant to get a tutorial on how to be a good worker. So Proverbs 6, 6 to 11 says, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man." And so in this case, the sage says that you should look at the ant and see its diligent hard work, and then consider your own lazy patterns and give them up, and adopt a lifestyle of hard work. Now, what the text tells us here is that it's a choice, right? Laziness and hard work is a choice. And so the sage, the wise man says, go and look at the ant. See how efficient they are, how hard they work, and then go be like that yourself. This is so important that it's even mentioned again in chapter 24, verses 30 through 34. It says, I passed a field of a sluggard by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles. Its stone wall was broken down. And then I saw and considered. I looked up and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. And so you have two illustrations, one of which is looking at an animal, the ant, and one of which is looking at a farmer's vineyard that is unkept, right? And it's full of thorns and nettles, and it's broken down, and it's going to be very hard to harvest in a field that is unkept, and your produce is actually not going to be very good, right? And so when I was growing up on the farm, there were certain things that we had to do. Clean out fence rows. We had to grub thistles. We had 2,000 acres. And if my dad saw a thistle on 2,000 acres, he'd lose his mind. And we'd be out there grubbing thistles, and you'd forget your gloves. So you got the hoe and you're trying to grab it by the root, because your hand and stuff. And then you look across the fence and you see the neighbor's field, and it looks like they were growing thistles. And of course, the wind blows. I'm thinking, this is an exercise in futility, right? I mean, this is worthless, right? But we would set our trays when we got done setting at the edge of the field, and they'd want them, the dad, before we put them in the trailer to haul off, he wanted them stacked together. And they would always say on our farm, this isn't blank farms. And that's not a cuss word. That's the name of a family from where I'm from that I can't say here because I can't promise that they won't watch this video on YouTube. But he was basically saying, I'm going to use the word Johnson. It was not Johnson. It was like, this ain't Johnson Farms, okay? Pick your stuff up. So once again, it was not the Johnsons, was not the last name. I just can't use the name of the actual people. Either way, my dad was like the sage of the Proverbs, right? Like, don't look at that field. That's not how it's going to be over here, right? So it applies to us. Be a self-starter, right? Go to work. Look at the ant. Nobody has to tell her what to do. She just does her job. I was talking to someone the other day, and their company had a program with the local school. And what they did every year, they would get 2 or 3 individuals to come to their factory, basically, and work as a co-op. Anybody ever seen this or heard of this, been familiar with this? And the guy who owned the business had told me in the last 30 years, one of the biggest things that he had noticed with kids coming out of high school or in high school versus years past, he said, they're not bad kids. He said, they're good kids. He said, and when you first get them, they're very annoying because you think they have no work ethic. They just sit there. They don't do anything. He was like, and I just get really frustrated. He said, then I'd realize they needed a list. He was like, I figured like used to, you could show somebody, the basic principles to do, and they would come and do it and then look around to look at other stuff they could do also. He was like, but kids these days, he was like, they just don't know how to be a self-starter. Like they can't look around the factory and say, oh, there's a pile of dirt right here. I should pick it up, because they think, well, he just said sweep this floor, and they don't sweep that floor. And he was like, so we just have to make a checklist. Basically, they come in and they see their checklist, and he's like, they check it off. We just have to keep adding things to the checklist, And but that idea of that is a form of laziness. We might not think of it that way, but not having any initiative, not being a self-starter, having to be constantly told what to do all the time, is actually kind of a form of laziness. And so be a self-starter, go to work, look for stuff that needs to be done. And that's applicable to all of us, regardless of age. The second thing that we see here is wisdom equals hard work. Wise people work hard. Proverbs 10, 4-5 says, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. And so laziness is at the height of foolish behavior. This is the height of foolish behavior because it directly impacts your life in a negative way. And it's simply a personal choice. I mean, there are things that are going to negatively impact your life that you can't choose. I mean, you can't choose. My great-grandfather was 4'11". My grandfather was 5'4". Okay, I'm 5'8". You can make fun of me for that, but I mean, I didn't have a choice, right? I mean, it's been detrimental to me. My NBA basketball career over before it started, right? I mean, and I'm just now getting over that. It's been a detrimental part of my life, but I had no choice in that. But there are some things that are detrimental in life that you do have a choice over, right? And so that's what the proverb says. And if you don't take care of the things that you do have control over in your life, well, that's just a sign of foolishness. I mean, if you can control it, you should control it. And if you don't, that's a sign of foolishness. And so one of the things is our work ethic and how we work. And so hard work is a sign of wisdom. Opposite side is also true, that laziness is defined by someone who is foolish. The next one, Brittany said this was too harsh, and she wanted me to rephrase it. And I first had lazy people are annoying, and she said that was too harsh. And so I changed it, lazy people are a nuisance, at her request. But Proverbs 10:26 says this. It says, like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is a sluggard or lazy person to those who send him. And so most people have had smoke in their eyes before. The experience is irritating, it is painful, and it can be debilitating. And so if you've ever had your own company or your own business and you've had to send somebody out to do something and you're paying them per the hour or for the job and you feel like they're lazy, that's annoying. It's infuriating. In fact, it can be detrimental because if you have a team of workers and one person is lazy, what's likely to happen? Everybody starts being lazy, right? Everybody starts being as fast as the slowest guy, right? And so, it's a nuisance. And it's not only a nuisance when it comes to the individual sending them out, but if you look at the book of Proverbs, and we'll look at as many verses as we can tonight, this is a agricultural-based society. And so the Proverbs talk about if a person is lazy and doesn't do their work, it negatively impacts them, but it also negatively impacts their family and the community at large. Because if a person is a sluggard who doesn't do their job, it affects the rest of the community, right? Because that person doesn't bring in food and the winter comes, well, now what is their family supposed to do? What is their community supposed to do? We're all about helping people, I understand that, but if someone's too lazy to work themselves, what did Paul say? If they won't work, they won't eat. But who likes to see your neighbor starve, even if he is a lazy nuisance? Right? Most people don't, right? So what it does is it's a time and energy suck on other people, right? So it just, lazy people are a nuisance. Don't be a nuisance to other people. Be a hard worker. Don't be lazy. On a personal level, being lazy is personally enslaving. Not only does it bring a negative taste to other people's mouths, also to your own. Proverbs 12:24, the hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. Not too long in human history, if you couldn't pay your bills, where did they send you? Debtor's prison, right? You had to work off your bills. You had to work off your debts, right? We don't do that in this country anymore. Maybe we should, but anyways, but being lazy is enslaving, right? Especially true in the ancient world, because that literally would cause you to become enslaved. I mean, this is not hyperbole. He's being literal. But even in our modern day, if we're lazy and we're not go-getters, we don't work very hard, we're going to find that our life is going to have lots of things that make us feel entrapped, that we can't get ahead, that things are difficult, that we are somewhat, if you will, in metaphorical chains. And that's true. The sad thing is that we put the chains on ourselves because of our own work ethic. The proverb says, don't do that. Like, don't enslave yourself by being lazy. The next thing he says here is that laziness brings poverty and hunger. And this has a plethora of verses throughout the Proverbs. We'll read a few of these, but if we were to read all of these, I don't know if we would have enough time. Proverbs 12:27, whoever is slothful will not roast his game, but the diligent man will get precious wealth. Proverbs 13:4, the soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly applied. And so both people are going to have cravings, right? The poor man, not poor, the lazy person has cravings, the hard worker has cravings. But who's much more likely to have their cravings filled? The hard worker, right? And if we give our children stuff all the time, everything they ask for it, and don't make them work for it, then what have we done? We've made them lazy and raised a generation of people who think they ought to have stuff just because they want it. Boy, does that sound like modern society? It does, right? Because we have forgotten that we're supposed to teach character and how to work, right? And we're seeing that in our own society. Proverbs 14:23, in all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty, right? And so someone that talks all the time and doesn't work, it's going to lead to deprivation, right? Someone who talks all the time, doesn't work, it's a sign of laziness. Yeah. Todd?
You're talking about laziness versus poverty. It's one of the rules in the Bible that I always found unique to the way God's people handle it was the idea of gleaning.
Oh, yeah.
When you went out and you harvested the vineyards, you were to harvest anything that fell was supposed to be left. You're supposed to leave the corners.
Mm-hmm.
But the poor were then to go in and glean for themselves. They had to go work.
Right.
You're helping the poor, but they had to go get it.
Right.
And here you're talking about a lazy person bringing about poverty, and actually the Bible teaches that, well, if you're poor, God will provide, but you still got to go work.
Yeah. I like what Todd is saying. He said, God will provide, but you still have to work. And Todd mentioned the gleaning of the Old Testament. If you're not familiar with that, the Israelites were commanded to leave the edges of their field unharvested. So if you go out and you'd harvest the corn, they didn't have corn back then, but let's just use corn or wheat, barley, whatever. We'll use wheat and barley. If they would have to leave the edges of their field for the poor and the sojourner, right? And so they would have to come. And so could you get food if you were poor? Yes, but what would you have to do? Got to go get it, right? And so that principle is still applicable to us today. I've always quoted the one by M.B. Hardeman, I think, but there's been lots of guys who said it. But he would say the best place to pray for the best place to pray for potatoes is at the end of a hoe, And so, like, if you want potatoes, pray for potatoes while you're digging potatoes. Like, it's a little give and take. Augustine in the 4th century said it first, I think. He said, work as if it all depends on you. Pray as if it all depends on God, which is basically the same thing. Proverbs 19:15, slothfulness casts into a deep sleep, and the idle person will suffer hunger. Proverbs 19:24, the sluggard buries his hand in the dish and will not even bring it back to his mouth. Proverbs 20, verse 4, the sluggard does not plow in the autumn, and he will seek a harvest and receive nothing. And so anybody ever cut corners due to laziness and reaped a bountiful harvest of stupidity? Ever done that? The worst part is when I think I'm going to save time. Whenever you're lazy, like you're doing a house project and you need a tool, and you're like, okay, I'm in the backyard and the tool I need is in the garage. Now, if I time myself and I walk to the garage, got the tool in back, it would take probably less than a minute, certainly less than 2, right? But I'm like, I don't really want to walk to the garage and back. I think I can take this other tool and I can fix it myself. Then what happens? Then you break it and you got to call somebody else come fix it because you were too lazy to walk to the, haste makes waste. So, I've done that many times, and that's laziness, right? And so, so we're all confessing our sins together here. Proverbs 20:13, love not sleep lest you come into poverty. Open your eyes and you will have plenty of bread. Proverbs 28:19, whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty. That's important, right? It says, he who follows worthless pursuits. Just because you're busy doesn't mean you're a hard worker. That's something we should think about, because oftentimes we equate being busy with being a hard worker, right? But if you're busy on worthless pursuits, sometimes it's a way to get out of hard work. That doesn't make you a hard worker, right? If you've got a list of things need to be done for the day, and then you stay busy doing everything else except the things that need to be done, you were busy, but that's kind of a sign of laziness, because you knew these were the important things that had to get done, and you didn't do it. You just kind of pushed it on back, right? And so don't do that. We're all guilty of it. Just don't do it. And so, me too, Miss Shirley. And so, Next one is being lazy makes life unnecessarily hard. Life is hard enough by itself with the things that we can't control. Don't make it unnecessarily hard by choosing to be lazy. Proverbs 15:19, the way of the sluggard is like a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a level highway. Notice what he says here. He says if you're being lazy, oftentimes it's because you think you're taking the easier path, but you're really just setting yourself up for a harder path just by not being diligent and doing the work yourself. Proverbs 18:9, whoever is slack in his work is a brother to him who destroys. Proverbs 21:25, the desire of the sluggard kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. And so being lazy in life makes life unnecessarily hard. Lazy, proud, and arrogant, a combination that is unfortunately all too common. But Proverbs 26:13-16 says this. The sluggard says, there's a lion on the road. There's a lion in the streets. There's a bear in Bedford County. No, sorry, wait a minute. Sorry. I mean, that's not there. I thought it was, but it wasn't. They killed a bear in Bedford County this week, y'all. Anyways, sorry. As a door turns on its hinges, so does a sluggard in his bed. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish. It wears him out to bring back to his mouth. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. And so, Tim, were there any people that didn't come to Calsonic because there was a bear in Bedford County? Anybody call out sick that day? Everybody talked about it all week, but nobody actually called in sick. Like, I'm not coming to work. There's a bear on the loose. No. Well, evidently, in ancient Israel, that was a common way to get out of work. You'd say, oh, why wasn't you here to dig this ditch? Man, there was a lion on the road. Can you believe that? And the wise man's like, yeah, there, probably wasn't a lion on the road. He just didn't want to come into work that day. And, but anyways, and so I like the way it says this, verse 16, the sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. And so making excuses as to why you can't work, like the line in the streets or this, that, and the other, or the refusal to listen to people who are wiser than you, who are trying to get you to work, is a sign of foolishness and laziness, right? I mean, just trying to find a laundry list of reasons why you can't do something is obviously a sign of laziness. My mom's favorite phrase growing up was can't, never could. And so you couldn't say I can't do something because you just can't, never could. And that's idea same here. What's that? Won't, never will. That's a pretty good one too. So can't, never could, and won't, never will. She never got to that part. It's hard enough for us to learn the first half of that. You want to do it together? Yeah. That's because you already got through the first step, Ricky. They couldn't get the first step in my mind. And so hard work is noticeable and pays off. Proverbs 22:29. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. We have lots of people in the room tonight who are managers or owners of their own company. Is hard work something that is easy for you to notice? Yeah, I mean, sometimes if you have a person who's a hard worker and someone who's lazy, you can pretty much tell that pretty soon, right? And who are you going to give more responsibility and privileges to? The hard worker, right? And so, there's people, if you want to elevate yourself above the rest, you should be a hard worker, right? And so don't complain that, Jim Bob over here has got the last 3 promotions. Maybe Jim Bob's a really good worker. I don't know. Maybe he's the president's son-in-law. I don't know what the situation is, but maybe he's a hard worker. Maybe you should be a hard worker too. And so if you want to stand out above the rest, apply yourself and work hard. And most of the times that's going to be pretty easily recognizable and that's going to be rewarded, right? So hard work pays off. But Don?
There's a saying in the business world, 20% of people do 80% of the work. Unfortunately, that's the same thing in the church.
Yeah, like Don said, it says 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Don said, unfortunately, that's true in the church too, right? And so that's really important, right? Do we think about work ethic when it comes in terms to working for the Lord? And so that's a really important point we got to think about, is not only being hard workers in our secular jobs, but being hard workers in our spiritual roles and services. And so it's a good point. And so work today for what you need tomorrow. And I think, Matt, didn't you have a proverb that went along with this idea? Make hay while the sun shines. Yeah. So that's basically like, kind of the equivalent to this. Work today for what you need tomorrow. Proverbs 27:23-27. Know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds, for riches do not last forever. And does a crown endure to all generations? When the grass is gone and the new growth appears and the vegetation of the mountains is gathered, the lambs will provide your clothing and the goats the price of a field. There will be enough goat's milk for your food, for the food of your household, and the maintenance of your girls. And so riches don't last forever. And so the surplus that you have now may not last. So be diligent and work and do what needs to be done. I saw something just last week where it talked about a man who was up in the Northeast. I forget which state, but he won the lottery. I'm not suggesting you play the lottery. It's just an illustration. But the man won the lottery. Like it was like $8 million. And after taxes and fees, because he's in the Northeast, he got like $3.5 million. Still more than I'll make in my lifetime. And he was a garbage truck man. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm saying he was a garbage man. So what does a garbage man do when he has $3.5 million? He quits his job. Guess what he was doing 7 years later? He was back to being a garbage truck driver. You know why? Because he had blown $3.5 million in 7 years. Because he liked to work. He's now owns the largest garbage truck company in the Northeast. No, that'd have been a good way for the story to end, right? Trash is my passion. I'm just job security. It ain't going nowhere, folks. We all make it. And but anyways, but no, I mean, if he just parked it in, a mutual fund, S&P 500, Duke could have lived off $300,000 of interest every year in perpetuity, right? That's wisdom. Blew it in 3.5 years. Look, how's that even happen? Cliff.
No grenade tonight, but
Oh, yeah.
one thing that I went to a Christian university, and one thing in my Hebrew professor taught me in his class, which stuck with me, is there's no Hebrew word for retirement.
Oh, yeah.
Which means there's no concept of never working. You're always to be called to work. There's no time to quit working.
Yeah.
You're always called to work. And which means not to say that you can't work and gain a pension, but you're never to cease working. Once you retire, your work will continue in a different form. But either you better step up in the church and become a deacon or an elder, or do some other type of employment, because you're never to stop working.
Yeah. I like Cliff's point, because at the heart of what Proverbs says, and what we'll talk about in just a minute, is what you're saying. Work glorifies God. And so work is an act that is glorifying. There's honor in work. There is, work is a good thing, but as a Christian standpoint, work honors God. And what are we here to do? Honor God. So we honor God with our work, our labor, right? And just like Cliff said, that doesn't mean you never have to never can retire, but it means, okay, I'm here to work and to serve. Where is that opportunity now? That we're always working, right? We should never just sit on a couch and watch TV for 20 hours a day in retirement like this.
Like old Mo's and Searchers, rocking chair by the fire.
The Searchers?
Yeah.
The old Western?
Yeah.
Oh.
Old Mo's.
It's been so long since I've seen that movie, man. I got to go back and watch that one. John?
It seems to me that in this country, my grandparents were the first generation to retire, or to be able to retire.
Yeah.
Even in this country, everybody worked until you died.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's just retirement is really
It's a new thing.
new thing.
Yeah.
And I've always found it interesting that we save money that we're going to use in the future instead of using it today to do something good or whatever. The concept always kind of has struck me as kind of odd.
Yeah. Just like John said, I'm not saying you can't retire, but don't check out of life. And oftentimes people equate the two, and we shouldn't, right? Retire from your work. If you labored hard for, I've got a friend of mine, I won't call his name, but he's about 3 years older than me, which makes him about 35. And he came and visited Chapel Hill about a year or two ago. And I said, "What are you doing these days?" He said, "I'm retired." I said, "You're what?" He said, "I'm retired." I said, "What do you mean you're retired?" He was like, "You got to remember, I'm older than you." I was like, "By 3 years? What do you mean older than me?" But and he has not checked out of life, which is good. But I'm just saying, don't equate the two. Moving on for time's sake, hard work is a characteristic of the wise and the godly. Proverbs 31:27, talking about the virtuous woman, it says that she does not eat the bread of idleness. And so in listing the qualities of a virtuous woman, one of the things that is highlighted is her work ethic. And the last one I cheated. It's not from the book of Proverbs, but it is from the Bible, so it still counts. And that's Colossians 3:23. And that is, hard work is a Christian virtue. And I want us to talk about that because it would not have been uncommon for people to equate the fact that hard work was a Christian value. You should work hard because you're a Christian. Christians work hard. Christians set themselves apart. I'm afraid that that's a Christian value that perhaps we have forgotten and maybe that we're not teaching to the next generation. You want to follow and love Jesus? Yes, I do. Well, then, okay, that's good. You're going to be a hard worker. Well, what does that got to do with being a Christian? Everything. Everything. You got to be a hard worker because you're the name of Christ, because you glorify God, because you've been called to labor in the kingdom, right? 1 Corinthians 15:58. Like it encapsulates everything. And so hard work is still a Christian virtue. Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work heartily or hard as for the Lord and not for men. And so we must not forsake working for the Lord for leisure. And that goes back to what Don was saying in the church. How often do we look at our service in the church more as leisure? We got 1 minute to drive this point home. But when we think about our life as a Christian, a lot of those things that we think about are wonderful, like retreats. Retreats are wonderful. Bible camp is wonderful. Getting together for fellowship meals is great. But those are actually more like Christian leisure activities than they are Christian work activities. And oftentimes we equate Christian leisure with Christian work. And we really shouldn't. We should love leisure and enjoy Christian leisure all we can, right? But it doesn't mean that we have checked the box of Christian work. And one of the ways that you can figure out where you can get plugged in the work of the church, Matt, is December the 3rd to the 5th at our upcoming evangelism seminar. And so, be praying for that, but also be thinking about, okay, I'm going to come and learn how I can get plugged in the work of the church, which is spreading the word in this community. And so conclusions and takeaways. Number one, don't be lazy. It's just foolish. It's a nuisance to others. It's detrimental to yourself. It's detrimental to those around you. And it does not bring honor to yourself, to your family, or to God. Number two, work hard and glorify God. It's good for you. It's good for your family, your community, the congregation. And most importantly, it brings honor and glory to God. And number three, hard work is still a Christian virtue. I Googled that phrase and I got article after article after article of Christian leaders talking about how hard work was not a Christian virtue. And I disagree with that. I think it is a Christian virtue. I think it was, and it still is, and it should be. And so think about that. Caleb?
One thing I think about with this is with our study of Song of Solomon, how he said, vanity of vanity, all is vanity.
I'm not brave enough to teach Song of Solomon. Ecclesiastes. Yeah. Some of y'all caught that joke. Some of you didn't.
But he talks about how everything is vanity under the sun. And he talks about item after item. He goes through there, and everything of this world is just vanity and it's useless. But then anytime he talks about hard work, he speaks of it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think throughout that entire book, he talks about how all the things of this world are useless and you won't find happiness in them. But hard work is the only thing in that I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Other than, serving God. But
Yeah.
other than that, hard work is the thing he says there is true value in that.
Well, there's just something about, if you ever worked a hard, laborious job, there's just something about getting to the completion that just feels good. You just feel good when it's done. Don?
Back again with 20% of people doing the work. If you look at the leadership,
Mm-hmm.
if you have your parents that are involved in church work, teaching class, being involved in different things, your children will be follow the same boat, and their children will follow the same boat. If you're not involved, it's pretty likely that your children will not be involved as well.
Like Don was saying, it's not enough to to talk to our kids about work ethic, we have to model that and be an example, right? And especially in terms of being a work ethic example in the church for them. That's good. Ms. Judy?
I heard a sermon one time on and then some.
And then some? I think I've heard something similar.
Work and pick up the home.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I was talking some of the days, like, don't settle for good when you can be great, right? Push yourself, drive. All right, if we don't get out of here, there's going to be some upset kids in the back. And so they're going to start tearing the walls down and stuff like that. So let's go ahead. Thank you guys so much for a great class tonight. Let's all go out there and shock our world with our work ethic, and let's close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for all the blessings you give to us. We're thankful for your love, your mercy, your grace, and your forgiveness we need each every day. We're so thankful for the wisdom that we can glean from your word, that you have seen fit to prepare us and to teach us how to live spiritually, but also how we are to live when it comes to our physical lives out in the world with our occupations, our careers, and how that bleeds over into our spiritual life and how we honor and glorify you. And dear Heavenly Father, it is a temptation to be lazy that all of us wrestle with on some level. And we just pray that you would give us the strength and the endurance to have a strong work ethic and to do that, not to bring honor to ourselves, but to glorify you. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.